Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Cabinet meeting for this evening. Can I start by reading out the usual announcements? Fire evacuation procedures for this evening's meeting. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening, so if you do hear the fire alarm, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the side of the room at the back with the door that's open. Please go through reception and please meet in the War Memorial. Don't leave, please meet in the War Memorial to make sure that everybody has been accounted for in the building safely. Webcast meetings, we are recording the webcast and it's being broadcast live on the internet and you can follow it on YouTube. Microphones, can we use the microphones where they are so that we appear on the screen in the right place, and also make them clearly when you come to the speaker platform, press the button clearly, we'll make sure we coordinate right. And then in terms of mobile telephones, could you all turn them off or turn them to silent, please? Thank you. Okay. Apologies for absence this evening. There are none. Declarations of interest. I'm not aware of anybody. If anybody has anyone, no. There are no urgent matters this evening. And on item 4, we have 2 sets of minutes to approve this evening. We have the first set of minutes that relate to our meeting on the 16th of July. Can I ask you, are you happy that they're a true record of the meeting, and can I sign them as such, please, colleagues?
Agreed.
Thank you. And then we have the Cabinet meeting on the 30th of July. Again, can I have them as a true record if you're happy, and I'll sign them as such? Agreed? Okay, both of those minutes will be signed and on the record. So, we're very conscious that when we came into position as the administration, when we took over the running of the council in May 23, that we would focus on things that people wanted their council to do. We would refocus the council very clearly. We're now 18 months on since taking administration, and we're very glad that we're being able to report back. So using item 5 on the agenda this evening, it's important, I think, that we reflect a little bit on just the things that have been going on of importance, particularly because it's focused on getting the job done and making progress on the things that are very important to us all. So we are now beginning to see the results of the boost in funding that we've made to frontline services to give people pride in their neighbourhoods. We have more staff on street cleaning, on grass cutting and hedge trimming, and we've also revamped the weed spraying service. Now, as well as investing in the frontline services, which we know make a big difference, we're also focusing on the larger projects. We took a paper recently to one of the committees, E&I committee, on the longer term aspirations to revitalise the Basingstoke Town Centre, and we had an amazingly positive conversation with colleagues across groups, and we are really focused on starting to make the support for new business a reality in the top of town. We want those businesses to thrive. So from Festival Place to the malls, the top of town or Basingview, our drive has been very clear. We only want to improve, we want to enable, but we also want to see investment. We're very focused in terms of how we think we can transform the town, and we've been busy making progress on a number of actions to improve the look and feel. We've had really positive feedback from our business community already on the work that's been undertaken. And just to say a few things, the idea of the work to clean up the top of town was ironic. It went viral on social media. I think it's the most watched video we've ever put up on social media. I think the comms team was saying it's about 37,000, 40,000 views of jet spraying, which is something else. But it's important. It's a really simple thing, but sometimes the simple things are actually really important. So cleaning the town centre, the pavements, completing the work to support the marketplace, such as repainting the benches, continuing the work around Woke Street, Church Street and Winchester Road are really important because that's what the business community themselves have told us. And so that's why it's important to us. So as well as that, we've also been out repainting the safety railings. It's unfortunate that the County Council wouldn't do that, but we are doing it. We're going to do it because it's important for the look of the town centre, and we're grateful for the County Council in letting us get on with that. It's important that we're refreshing the planters throughout the area, and we're looking at both summer and winter in terms of what we're doing. Now, one of the things that we did promise when we started was to listen to residents, and we've been taking our message out to villages and towns around our borough, engaging with those communities. And we've spoken, we think now, to over 200 parish councillors in over 30 parish councils across the borough. And they really welcome the fact that we went out to their parishes to talk to them about their issues and concerns. And we're doing it again. And we're going to make it a regular feature of what we do as a cabinet by taking our message and their issues to talk to them in their parishes and their communities. It's very important that we do that. And we've also shown that we're turning those words into action, because we have delivered a draft local plan in February on the back of our Regulation 18 consultation, which was widely consulted on, and we are ready to get on with that plan that we've drafted with colleagues, all that work that's gone into that. Many Down is now progressing both north and south. We're in discussions to progress a university. We're delivering our important anti-poverty strategy. We are working through a strategy that will be a very important part of how we lift our communities all up. There's a strategic importance of our leisure park, which we reckon, and there is an absolute amount of work going on behind the scenes by our officer team to bring forward proposals for the leisure park. And also, I just want to highlight, finally, just some of the economic strategy and the business work that's going on. We have an amazing team reaching out to our business community, and in doing so, working with groups like the AA or working with other businesses, that business community are seeing our team and what they do, working with Destination Basingstoke and the Chamber, of course. But that's really important, that relationship that we have with the business community, and also the skills programme that we're developing, working with both our colleges and the business community around employment and skills and what we can do to promote work and jobs and skills in the community, particularly around STEM. So there's a huge amount of work going on, very positive work. And finally, I just want to emphasise the work the homeless team are doing. We have exemplar homelessness services in the borough, and it's something that an awful lot of work has gone into to make them exemplar, but we should be proud of the work we're doing, and it shows the excellence of our officer team in delivering that. So there's a few highlights, but Gavin, would you like to add to that?
This could be a very long meeting, the way we're going. Yes, our recycling rate has seen us at the bottom of the league tables for years, but we've brought forward plans to introduce food waste collection, to take a third out of our waste bins, and we've also agreed to revamp our waste collections that will see recycling rates rise even further. Hasn't happened yet, but the bins are on order, they are coming. We've made that big decision. The council set itself a tough target to be carbon neutral by 2025, and we've been pushing forward in every way we can to try and reach that goal. There is nothing more important to the future generations that will live in this borough than tackling climate change and the ecological emergency. Declaring an climate emergency was really easy. The hard stuff is actually delivering that. The Green Team has been out supporting people in their homes, in businesses and schools to make a positive change to cutting carbon in their everyday lives. Over 4,000 doors have been knocked on by the Green Team, 500 surveys completed, and 1,200 trees given away to residents. We've reduced our operational emissions by over 30% since declaring a climate emergency, with further reductions resulting from swapping to biofuel in our bin trucks. Energy efficiency has been upgraded in 25 council-owned buildings across community and commercially owned property. Every opportunity for a release, we make sure that we go greener as well. Since the Make a Difference team started work at the beginning of the year, it's targeted neighbourhoods across Popley, Brighton Hill, Northern, Southam, Winklebury, Brookvale and Kings Furlong, as well as Eastdrop. Some 36 neighbourhoods have benefited from their work, making a real difference to their local environments. Extra resources in the sweeper team has led to a 20% reduction in leaf clearance requests. Eastdrop Park and our aspirations to breathe new life into this amazing green lung in the heart of our town, to regeneration of our communities, working with our social housing partners to realise one of the most ambitious programmes for renewal we've seen. We've delivered an amazing events programme, driving footfall into the town and across our communities, supporting culture and sport, investing directly in hockey, cricket, as well as many other sports that people play. And we haven't forgotten, and the work is ongoing with the ice rink and Basingstoke Town Football Club. All of that has been done. We've managed to balance the budgets. We've been chosen to invest where it makes a difference. And the credit's got to go. We talked a lot about the frontline services that this borough has and should be rightly proud of, but also there's an army of people working in the background to make sure that we can deliver these services. So our property investment team has spent a lot of effort and time making sure that rent renewals go forward and we generate the extra income to insulate us from the inflation that otherwise would have resulted in cuts. In just 18 months, we've begun to make a real difference, and this is not all we're doing is listed here. It's just the headlines. I want to thank officers for working so hard to deliver it. And we want to say to people, our focus is on getting on with the job done, and we know there is much more to do.
Thank you, Gavin. Colleagues, would you like to join and reflect on Annalee?
So just very briefly, I'd like to say what a huge privilege it is to be a member of this cabinet and to have two outstanding leaders. It has been a real honour to serve in this cabinet for the last 18 months. Just very briefly on the three kind of main headlines that I'd like to flag up. It is in the leisure park is the Aquadrome. We're very excited about where we are on that, and it will be launched at procurement at the end of October. We've already issued what's known as a PIN, a prior information notice, which is ostensibly a warm-up pre-procurement, and it's been extremely well received, so that's very exciting. In terms of the town centre, the leaders have both referred to it. We are progressing very methodically through the master plan, and we're dialoguing with really huge companies externally, together with the officers, and are very excited that we're going to be able to develop and deliver a really exciting vision for our borough and its next chapter. And the story of Basingstoke. And finally, in terms of Basing View, again, some good stories. There's still masses more to do, as the leader referred. But we've got an opening of the former Wiggins Teep offices, which I've known all my life, which is now called Plant. And there's going to be a big opening next week, and that's a grade A office, which we're super excited about. And we really want to see all the office offer on Basingstoke going forward as grade A. We want to go back to the glory days of Basingstoke in the 1980s, where we have some top corporates who want to be here and employing our people. And finally, packaged living. Officers, Sarah, the head of projects and regeneration, and I went up to Milton Keynes, and we saw in the flesh the offer that packaged living has, and we were blown away by it, and it'll be a fantastic addition to the offer of built rent products in the borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Annalie.
Thank you. I suppose in relation to my portfolio, I think the focus is frontline services, and as a cabinet, our commitment is to frontline services. So following on from last year, we were really successful in refurbishing 5 parks. This year, we're doing another 5 parks as well. So there'll be a major makeover of those parks, and also we're breathing new life into existing play areas by replacing individual pieces of equipment that have reached the end of their lives. I'll give you an example of that is the access swing in East Rock Park. It's now been replaced. There was no money available, but we've put money into the budget to allow those things to take place. Talk about the town centre. We've now got a weekend team that's working throughout the weekend. That's additional staff, and they've also got a new bit of kit, a new sweeper, which is going to make a massive difference. Our focus is to love and give the town centre attention, and that requires a really big, deep clean, and that work has started. If you come out of the station now, you'll see that the planting is starting to look so much better, and there's such an amount of work been going on. And just in front of the planting, round the corner from Anvil, we're going to see the jet spraying taking place there. So we can take some more videos. There are lots of exciting things to focus on. So yeah, it just gets better and better. In relation to the town centre, I think we listened. We had meetings with the town, and one of the things that we did immediately after meeting with them is to reduce the public liability, enabling more and more people to take part and to encourage the cafe culture. And I think that's what the businesses want, and that's what I think the residents want to see as well in the top of town. Moving on to the in relation to waste, the garden waste garden subscribers is now at our all-time high. We've got 6,900 people are subscribing to that service, which is great in relation to what we're wanting to achieve. In relation to also, I mean, you've nicked some of my ideas that I was going to talk about, so I won't. I'll leave those in relation to that. But and I was going to talk about we're going to be implementing the food waste. In relation to housing, our priority has been, and we've been very committed to delivering socially rented housing. And I'm pleased to say that we've seen a significant increase in tenancies offered in social rented housing rather than affordable. And our own current projections suggest that by 2025-26, the majority of all new affordable rent delivered will be socially rented, which is great news, considering I think we had 4 last year, which is such a change. The investment in the additional staff has enabled us also in housing to look at the register and do some really deep analysis of the register, but also to offer home visits to people who are particularly vulnerable. And so we're actually doing a lot more work in relation to that, and that's sort of additional to the day job and what we do. So that's great. I think it's really important to talk about just the like Paul has said, the exemplary housing department that we have, and at this time when we're in such crisis, that we are achieving such great things, and we're also preventing homelessness with the support of an amazing group of partnerships that we have in relation to the Social Inclusion Partnership. But I couldn't say more about and really praise that team and what they're doing. In fact, all of the teams that I work with, I'd like to say a really big thank you, because they're working incredibly hard to deliver these frontline services for us. And I couldn't finish, but when I need to finish talking about toilets. I think it's really important that I talk about public toilets. And we've against a backdrop of the last administration closing public toilets, we're opening them up. We've actually in the rural areas now got toilets that are open at weekend, and we've put more investment into that. We've seen the East Rock Park. We're opening the toilets, and we have opened the toilets at weekends in the winter in East Rock Park. We've opening the disabled toilet in Memorial Park, where we've opened the park for the park run. That was the very first thing that we did. We have 600 plus runners in the park on a Saturday, and they had no public toilet. And so that was the very first thing we did. But there's so much going on, but just a snapshot of what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Andy?
Okay, good evening. Yes, we've spoken a lot about public services already, and I'd like to put on my ward councillor hat. I'm one of the 3 ward councillors for Brighton Hill, and thank my cabinet colleagues and the officers' teams for all of their support over the last 18 months or so. Because from grounds maintenance to community safety to sport and leisure facilities, things are heading in the right direction finally. It's really encouraging to see, and I've got every confidence that that's going to continue over the coming months and years. So thank you all for that. I had hoped to tell you this evening about our ambitions to take our draft local plan to final public consultation at the very start of 2025. As we all know, we made updating our local plan a top priority when we took over the running of the council in May 2023. And we've made a huge amount of progress in that time. We've strengthened the plan policies in key areas such as livability and environmental performance. We've cut the housing number during the first 5 years of the new plan period to below 700 homes a year. And we've received constructive feedback from thousands of residents. All of this hard work by officers, by my cabinet colleagues, and by councillors from all sides of the chamber meant that we were on track to finalise our plan next year and start building the high quality, sustainable and genuinely affordable homes that the residents of our borough tell us that they need. However, all of that progress is now in jeopardy. The new government has proposed changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, which will rewrite the rules of how local plans like ours have to work. These changes would see our housing number rise to nearly 1,200 new units a year, and will likely force us to go back to the drawing board with our local plan. And if that's not bad enough, we'd also be open potentially to harmful speculative development while all of this happens. Let me assure everyone listening that we don't support these changes and we're fighting them with everything that we've got. And there is still hope. The government's consultation on these proposed changes hasn't finished and the proposals haven't come into force. There's still time for the government to listen, and we really hope that they will. We've got a local plan that's almost ready to go. It sets high standards for new homes in our area, and it proposes the right number of homes in the right parts of our borough. We've got this far, we've achieved so much. Now please let us finish the job. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. John.
Yes, how to follow the big centrepiece that Andy's got in his speech there, which is very impactful on the borough. Some good news, and I hope it works out well for all of us. The centrepiece of my portfolio isn't inside this room either, and it's Basingstoke as a wider community, which I think is a very strong community. And why do I say that? It's because of the multi-strands and the cross-links between all the strands in that community that mean the overall community is stronger than it might be if it was a lot of separate issues. And I'm fantastically privileged to have great officers that I've worked with in the last 18 months who are the people that actually facilitate and make that work between too many organisations to actually mention out in the community, which are part of that ecosystem. I'm happy to say that I think we're a key partner in leading and in facilitating all of this environment that's out there. Whether it's strategic partners that we continue to work with, like BVA and the Citizens Advice and many others, directly in supporting organisations with a range of grant schemes. We've continued the Strengthening Communities grant scheme that the previous administration thought to stop. Our officer team are currently active with 35 applicants for the current Community Infrastructure Fund grant scheme, and we've already received 20 applications under the Councillor grant scheme, which is up year on year. So that scheme is coming really into some sort of maturity, and I really hope that this year will be the first year where all the councillors around the chamber fully use the grants that are available to them. But we're not just there in terms of that leadership role, we're also there in times of trouble. And an example there would be the West Side Community Association, who lost their building due to the RAC and problems with the building that we share with Hampshire County Council. And the team have been working with partners like the Community Association in Southam and SNG as part of our commitment to make sure we have the right provision in Southam going forward, which in the short term is taking shape in a community cafe and hub for the Community Association, and discussions with the other partners as to the long-term solutions continue. Reaching out to all the strands and all the cross links of that community, that we're lucky enough to have a few examples where, you know, a good work that's gone on in terms of inclusion. Fantastic Diwali parade late last year, and this year's Diwali is in sight. And this year we had our first Pride event in Basingstoke. It was a fantastic family event, and it was a pleasure to be there. And we lead by indicating our support for events like this that allows the organisations that really do the running to actually make it happen. And sometimes it's not officer time and money, sometimes it's just being present. And a good example of that is the Interfaith Peace Walk that took place at the weekend just gone, where we walked from a church in Popley Way to that fantastic St Michael's Hospice, one of a wonderful charity. So, I mean, we're committed to supporting our community safety team, who I must say we're extremely lucky to have, and not for the first time. I was in a meeting last night with representatives of other local councillors in our community safety partnership, and to hear our Chief Inspector say how important our community safety team is to the work that his police team do was absolute joy to my ears, and you know, great praise for our community safety team. We're also very interested in the health and well-being of all of the residents in the borough, and there are just too many initiatives to sort of run through tonight, but from basic things like physical activity events to help people who take no exercise to doing a couple of kilometres of exercise. We've run a couple of rounds of this now, and it's really working, and the information from the public health experts is that we can really make the biggest impact on the health of our residents by helping those who do very little exercise to do some, rather than focus on the people who play lots of tennis and cycle like I do. We've got to put the help where it's really needed. And finally, we'll be looking to expand the Relax Kids scheme that we've been running in schools in the borough to help children manage their emotions. And I think the events of the last few years, like COVID and the like, mean that nationally there's a challenge to be faced, and as an administration we're determined to do our part in that response. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Chris.
Oh, look, it's working. Thank you, Luna. Well, firstly, I just want to echo some things that have been said. That I find it's a great honour to have been serving on this cabinet. I have obviously the portfolio for the climate and ecological emergencies, but my goodness me, have I got some big challenges. I think we all have in our own ways. So what I thought I'd do is just run through where we are with the 2025 climate emergency target. It breaks down into things like the council's operational carbon emissions. We're getting on for over 2/3 of reduction since 2019 baseline. We've had big gains in reduction of emissions from our operational fleet as a result of switching to HVO, vegetable oil, in our refuse vehicles and all our maintenance vehicles. We put incentives now, the electric Hackney cabs grant programs in place, and we've got the first cab has been put on the streets, which is good, and we have our EV charger delivery program. However, ideally, we've always wanted, and we do want, the new aquadrome in place to achieve our target, but there are more initiatives in progress which should help us achieve the zero goal. So that's looking positive. What are we doing? Our property, we're putting in, we have an ongoing community centre PV project, solar PV project. We're delivering solar PV on Tadley Health and Fitness Centre alongside design works for hybrid heating systems. And we're implementing sustainability work programmes on our council operational buildings. Externally, Councillor Gavin James has reported on our green team, how they're working well and what they've done. They've also held successful eco home events in the town and Green Week. They've taken part in displays and engagement during those weeks. We've now launched garden surveys supporting the biodiversity strategy and engaging more residents. We're now offering business sustainability audits. We're launching now schools engagements linked to our ranger team to support the ecological emergency, and they are continuing to promote the grants and the support for residents. We're also starting to look at the supply chains, how they actually contribute to the carbon of this borough, but it's something we're working on, but it's looking that there's a lot of carbon that we could be seen to indirectly, if you like, reduce. So 2030 is the next big challenge. So we can't, as a council, physically deliver net zero, but it's about how we can influence. So we're going to lead by the example. We're going to establish strategies and policies. So our local plan, it dovetails in with some of the policies there. Our EV strategy. We need to lobby our partners, the government and Hampshire County Council. There are some delays with car charging programs. We need to push this forward. We're going to facilitate knowledge through our green team, providing, again, direct support to residents and businesses. And we need to start to encourage a green economy in the borough, i.e. help people to train installers and engineers and find the number of people we need. So we need to work with partners. We need to challenge, like our registered social landlords, Sovereign, Vivid. They've got a different target. They have 2050 as their target. Our target is 2030, so we've got a little bit of negotiation to do. There is a disappointing lack of commitment with housing developers on new sites, which are currently being delivered, however, without any net zero homes. So that is something we've got to find a way of working towards. But we also need to encourage behavioural change. From our 2022 resident survey, over 60% of people, whilst they feel informed about how they can help with climate change, we're finding there's a reluctance. Only 4 in 5 would not consider installing solar panels. Fewer than 1 in 10 would think about swapping from a boiler to a heat pump, from a gas boiler to a heat pump. People aged 65 and older told us that they were less likely than other groups to make carbon cutting. We've just got to get the message through and work and demonstrate and show what can be done. So how do we progress this? Well, we're commissioning work on what needs to happen and when. For example, just to highlight the scale of a challenge, for retrofitting of homes, we've got 80,000 properties. The estimated cost of retrofitting these homes, something like 100 retrofits a week to get to a mid-range, the EPC, the energy rating for homes of C. That's going to cost nearly, what, £1.5 to £3 billion. It's going to be difficult to get people to spend that kind of money. We've got to move away from gas. So we're going to commission a roadmap this autumn. So that's what we're absolutely currently doing. So just moving then on to the ecological emergency, biodiversity. So last year we strengthened the biodiversity team. We developed and agreed a biodiversity strategy. We developed and agreed a biodiversity net gain policy. We're working with river trust specialists to understand and monitor the quality of our rivers. We're engaging communities using citizen science where we can. We've received a borough-wide audit of our biodiversity, which will assist us with our future goals. Our ranger team is working with 17 volunteer groups. They're working as a team to enhance Basingstoke and Dean's natural environment. But thanks are definitely due to the efforts of our volunteers, because they have more than doubled the number of hours spent on conservation projects in the borough in a year, which is magnificent. So delivering the strategy is now our challenge. We're focused on helping to reverse the decline of biodiversity within our borough. That is our goal. So, for example, some of the things that we plan to do: to create nature partnership to take forward joint projects, increase the diversity of species present on our council-owned land, supporting communities and developers to boost biodiversity. We're going to encourage residents to turn their gardens into wildlife havens and explore the possibilities of making our green, open spaces better connected and accessible. So that was a very brief run through. So I must thank all of the office on all of these emergency projects throughout the borough for all their hard work. So let's rise to the challenge ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Kerry.
Oh, sorry, President.
Thank you, Leader, and thanks for this opportunity. I've spent many hours today looking over my portfolio and found an incredible amount of work done. So I've got to thank the officers for everything they've done and everyone else who's involved. Unfortunately, that meant I had a lot of things to try and condense down, and I've made a terrible job of condensing it down. I've got this weird scratchings here, so maybe you could help us with a speechwriter or something like that next time. So you've given my portfolio the nickname of Portfolio of Fun, which I agree with. I've had a lot of fun doing this portfolio, but also it's very important. Sports, leisure and culture is incredibly important for the well-being of our residents. So I'm going to start off with the cultural side. One of our key achievements in this is to continue to support the events programme. We've had 18,000 people being part of our events programme, from Friday to the Halloween to Festive Friday to Let It Glow. Let It Glow on its own had 10,000 visitors. That's just when you have the light installations around the top of town and they go into the park. Absolutely fabulous. Basingstoke Festival got 12,000 visitors. Again, I was really lucky this year. I got to be part of all these events and see them for myself. And one of with the Basingstoke Festival, just to say that it's a lot of street and outdoor performances, and the best thing about them is that they are literally in our spaces, in the top of town, in the malls, in the festival place at East Rock Park, and you can literally walk by and suddenly be faced with a big time glass where people are doing acrobatics on, and I think that was the beauty of it. It was people accessed the arts just by falling upon it, and I think taking away from that, they will go and maybe take up a hobby or maybe study it, and that's why I think it's so important that we continue to support that programme. Another thing was that we did take these events programme and Basingstoke Festival out to the parishes and out on the road this year. I'm really supportive of this. It's not just Basingstoke, it's Basingstoke and Dean. And I think if we can get parishes to support it and community groups to support it, then we can grow. For example, Bishop's Green got a performance and they may not get the chance to see something in certain areas. They just don't get to see it, so that's brilliant. Moving on to sport, it's going quite quick, so I'll go a quick tour around. We've done floodlights at Russell Howard. Floodlights? Yeah, floodlights. Russell Howard Park for the netball. Cricket, we've Whitchurch have got a new artificial pitch and electrical supply has been sorted out. Football, we've talked to Basingstoke Town Football Club. We've got a better relationship. They've moved into their new clubhouse. They've got past the Tier 3 ground rating, which is great. Hurst should get a new in Tadley. We'll get a new artificial grass pitch, which we can't wait. And also we've kept up our relationships with Hampshire FA, which we have to continue. Going on, right, so the major sporting hubs like Down Grange, there's quite a funny story where we got one of the we actually had an Olympic quality hockey pitch installed, so I was lucky enough to go down there when GB visited. So I wandered around with one of the officers, walked up to a guy and sort of said, "Oh, hi, who are you?" And he turned out to be the manager of England and GB. See, I don't know, GB, not a big hockey guy, but GB hockey manager. So he's like the Gareth Southgate of the hockey world. And we also got to see the women's team. So that's absolutely incredible that they came to come to practice at Down Grange, and it was and also the team there, Basingstoke Hockey Club, were really delighted to have him. That coincided, we managed to get the showers done for him, and also at Down Grange we've managed to do a lot of support of the athletics there, and we put a starters container there to work, so there's a lot of work done. One of the biggest things this year is the War Memorial Park. When I went down there, when I first got the portfolio, I thought, what an amazing space, and it coincided with a change in operator with our tennis centre. So we've welcomed National Tennis, and we've had a smooth takeover with Totally Tennis, and it's nice because Totally Tennis, the guy who runs that, is still using the tennis centre, so we haven't lost his expertise, and also National Tennis are going from strength to strength with their numbers. They've introduced pickle ball, which is a different form of tennis, and also we're looking to open a community cafe there, and the works are almost complete. So alongside putting a new artificial cricket pitch in, we now have the skate park and also the workout area. So we've got a real good space with a cafe where it could be a real nice place in the summer for when that happened, we managed to have a wellbeing day, which we put together, and this was really crossed over with the wellbeing side of things, because we had the rangers there, we had the musication station from the Anvil Trust, and Natural Basingstoke, as well as the gymnastics club and a number of people that come on the day, and we got about 500 people there, and it was a really good first attempt. The artificial pitch actually was really good because it's enabled a new cricket team has formed called Capital Cricket, and they came along on the day and actually provided a place where the kids could play cricket, and it was really good to see a mixture of people playing. Just moving on and trying to finish, so the circuit, going on to the main sporting facilities that we have under the Basingstoke Leisure Trust. We've got Tadley Pool, the Aquadrome, and the tennis centre. One of the main things here is the improvement with the communication between all parties involved. I feel like it's improved greatly, and a lot of that is the comms. So if anything goes wrong, it's put out there, and we all talk to each other. The public know what's happening, which is excellent. And when it comes to Tadley Pool, there's been vast improvements there. We've got historic problems with chlorine levels and temperature issues that have been sorted. We've had an upgrade to the health centre. Going back to the Aquadrome again, we want to you know, it's a really great facility that we need to keep going, and that has we've added a cafe in there, and we're not neglecting the golf centre. We're looking into reprovision because of the Great Wolf thing, but we're still ordering new equipment and maintaining it properly. Over this year, we've introduced 2 new strategies: the built sports facility strategies and the playing pitch strategy. So that's gone through. We had some good scrutiny in CEP, and finally that's on the website for everyone to look at, which is brilliant. So I just want to say a big thank you, and mainly also to welcome Abigail and Amanda to the sports team, and thank you to all the events teams who are brilliant, and they're really key for our residents to see the borough in action, because when they're out there with their pink tops and the events team on the back, they're a really good representative. And other than that, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kerry, and thank you, colleagues. I just think it's important just once in a while, just to reflect on just how much is going on and what this council does, because we punch so far above our weight on so many things. And it's not just us, it's not just our officer team who are absolutely amazing, it's all the partners that we work with too. For everything we do, we have such amazing partners across the borough that work with us. And through that combination of our efforts, we're doing so much, it really is Basingstoke. So just once in a while, it's just good for us to reflect, I think, on just the success of the officers team, the council's work, what we do as the 54 councillors for all our residents. And it's just a really positive story. If you actually dig into it, it is a positive story about what we are achieving for our borough. But we don't rest on our laurels. There is an awful lot of work to do, and there are a lot of issues that need to be resolved. And I'm sure we will come on to some of them this evening. But no doubt it's just important, as I say, once in a while. So moving on from the agenda, item 6 is the negotiated stopping policy. Aaron, would you like to come up to the speaker desk? And Laura, would you like to introduce the paper?
Thank you, Leader. The Council had an injunction order prohibiting unauthorised encampments in certain areas of the borough for 6 years. During this time, there has been considerable legal debate about such injunctions and the tests of obtaining one. The Council has successfully applied to extend the injunction against persons unknown and the new maximum period of 1 year until April the 3rd, 2025. The judge hearing the application to extend the injunction required the Council to provide an undertaking to the court to progress a negotiated stopping policy to Cabinet for adoption. If such policy is not adopted by the Council by the 31st of October 2024, the Council is required to notify the court, and a hearing will be listed to review the continuation of the injunction order. The injunction has been highly successful at preventing the issues caused by unauthorised encampments within the injunction area. The negotiated stopping policy gives an opportunity for those who wish to stop on council land to request permission to lawfully do so. This would provide a mechanism for tolerated and well-behaved and sensibly sized encampments on appropriate sites. The draft policy proposes that requests to stop must be received prior to taking up land occupation. As part of the request process, applicants would need to provide full contact details and sign an agreement undertaking that they and any others at the encampment site will not undertake activities that amount to antisocial behaviour. The agreement will be also required for occupiers to leave the site by a given date and time, to leave it clean and tidy. The agreement provides that any breach of the terms will cause the agreement to be terminated immediately and required immediate vacation of the land. So just to remind everybody, the recommendation to Cabinet is that the negotiated stopping policy and associated agreement set out in Appendix 1 be approved and adopted, and that 2, that the authority is delegated to the head of Environment and Community Services to make minor amendments to the policy as required, where such amendments do not significantly change the existing policy or procedures thereunder. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Aaron, you have 4 minutes. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. I don't need 4 minutes. It's okay. I understand it is a legal requirement for us to provide a policy before 31st of October. Here, the deputation is just to make some suggestions on some of these policy, which I consider lack of clarity, which is one of them is it doesn't specify how much in advance the applicant has to give the notice to the officers, especially when they are making an application the weekend, how much time our officers will be having to make the decision. Before making the decision, they may occupy it. And the second suggestion is what happens if our officers, based on some of the reasons mentioned in the policy, reject the application? Do the applicant will be having any appeal process on this? Where do they go about it? And this policy doesn't really mention it. So if there is a provision on that, that would be very helpful. And again, one more thing is, did the cabinet consider identifying any dedicated sites for these purposes? If we don't identify a dedicated site to make an application for, that means we are opening up all our borrowed spaces. Anywhere they can make an application, and it is very difficult. So some of the councils has allocated, not the Test Valley one, they have dedicated some sites where they can make an application, and they know that the travelers, they can make an application with these clauses, they have a successful chance. Are there any limitations on the number of applications they can make? I know the policy specifically says the 14 days is a maximum application time. So if an individual, every 14 days, if they're continuously making the application, or a group of people are making the application, then it may prolong for quite some time. So if the policy can introduce something like an individual in a year or in 2 years, this many applications they can make, that would be a tight policy where we cannot make these travelers a permanent residence here. So the final one is, considering that we had 5 months to make this policy, what my suggestion is any community consultations would have been very better for giving some chance for the local residents to make some more inputs like these ones. This paper has come 3-4 days before, so I could contribute this much. So when we have given the chance to the community, they can make some more suggestions, which will be very valuable for us to take it forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron. Laura?
Thank you, Aaron. What we will do, Aaron, is I will give you a written response to and copy in maybe all members as well in relation to the issues you raise in relation to notice, appeal. In relation to the notice, this isn't they will be required to fill in the process, and then it will be assessed as to whether they can stop. It's not an immediate thing. They can't just turn up on a Friday and fill in the form. So there is, and I think the policy refers to that, but I will point you to that and give you that information. And in relation to the appeal process, I don't know the answer to that, whether there is an appeal process. But, you know, in relation to other authorities, there are many people that make requirements to stop, but just because they make the requirements doesn't mean that they will be successful in that. And it isn't in relation to something that they can keep doing. This is exceptional circumstances for whatever reason. It may be one of the travellers are about to give birth and need access to medical care, or one of the travellers has an extreme medical condition that needs some access to medical care. So it isn't that they can just choose to stop, and it isn't a way of extending their time that they can stop. but it's also, it isn't also, and I think there's some sort of confusion within the questions that you're asking about. This isn't us offering up transit sites. This isn't that. This is about, in relation to the injunction, giving the unnamed known travellers the opportunity to stop. We're required to do that legally, but it isn't us saying to the community, come up with areas that they can stop. As you know, that most authorities aren't prepared to do that, and I'm not sure in relation to the community that's what we're asking them to do. This is about the travellers themselves applying to stop on exceptional circumstances. And in relation to other authorities, I think there's one authority I'm aware of in London, which is a unitary, but that is a transit site that they have. So this policy doesn't relate to us identifying sites. This is something quite different to a transit site, and that work is going on in relation to the work that Andy is doing on the local plan and in relation to planning policy. So it's a very different piece of work. So it's not going to the community saying, where would you like these travellers to stop? And it's not, and we're also not saying that in applying to stop that they will be successful in that. But it's a requirement if we want to have an injunction that we do have to have this policy. The policy is, our injunction is valid until April. Whether we will be successful again in April and in getting that extension, it's taken an enormous amount of work of the officers within this council and the police, and I don't know that we'll be successful. So, but what we will do is we will review this policy in April if we are as successful in being able to carry on and have an additional year as an injunction.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, colleagues, would anybody else like to make a contribution to the debate? We've got the recommendation in front of us, as Laura has pointed out. Chief Executive, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, we'll need to add a delegation. So can we add an additional delegation that authority is delegated to the Head of Environment and Community Services to take decisions under the terms of this policy? Apologies, that should have been added previously.
Okay, colleagues, I'm happy to move that amendment as said by the Chief Executive into item 2 of the recommendation, adding that amendment to the recommendation with the recommendations in front of us as Laura then set out on page 26. And bearing in mind, I don't think anything that Aaron has raised stops us making the decision. It will give him a written response to those particular points, as Laura has outlined, where we are able to. However, are you happy to take that recommendation, Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, on Aaron's point, I mean, perhaps could it be clarified about where it says if you haven't filled in a form ahead of landing on a site, you will be moved on immediately because you haven't filled the form in. I can't quite find those words, or are we satisfied that they are there? That's my question.
Chief Executive, can you help us here?
Sorry, I don't sort of see that. It is forbidden to do this, but it doesn't actually say that you. I think that it's a valid question how long it will take us to actually issue this, and
Let's just clarify that.
yeah, I just would like clarification.
No. Well, again, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've taken this from an authority that already has this action in place, so it's there. In terms of taking it forward, the delegation is to the officers to amend and make appropriate amendments. We've also got a delegation in here relating to the actual action of the paper that the Chief Executive has moved. Paragraph 6. There we go. I thought we would get there. So paragraph 6 on page 34 of the report. Yes, that's clear. Well, only. Yes, that is clear, actually. There we go, colleagues. It is.
I think they're very responsible and sensible questions from Aaron, and we'll get the written answers. I think the other thing to give reassurance is, obviously, we went to court to keep the injunction going. There was an immediate, you must have something in place by a certain date, which we've done. There's a recognition, because we've moved through that process quite quickly to comply with the court, which we must do, that obviously there's nothing stopping us reviewing it. So at some point in the near future, because we'll have to renew this every year anyway, so the policy can be reviewed, and certainly be something we'll have a wider consultation with the committee. It'll go through a committee at some point in the future, but we have to get this over the line and approved and in place by the end of this month. Otherwise, someone's got to go to court to explain themselves, which we don't want to do.
As I'm conscious that the appendix, as it is written in a very particular language, so thank you for clarifying the meaning of those paragraphs that we were reading from. So, colleagues, again, on the basis of the recommendation in front of us, on the basis of the debate that we've had, on understanding those matters where we've questioned, and having Aaron's questions as asked, are we happy to agree the recommendation? Agreed. Thank you. I'm going to move from 7 now to agenda item 8, because I've got 2 speakers on agenda item 8, and that is Maritime House. And I'm going to ask Laura to introduce the paper, followed by Gavin. And Andy, would you like to come up to the speaker spot? And you're up first when we get there. So, Laura, would you like to introduce the paper when you're ready?
Thank you, Nita. The work of our housing department is trailblazing. This report tonight is just another example of their forward thinking. We will use homelessness prevention monies to purchase Maritime House to protect the key services provided from this property. Subject to the survey, this building will offer us the opportunity to build our innovative work to end rough sleeping and to prevent homelessness, working closely with our social inclusion partnership. This site is a key town centre location, well served by public transport, and the purchase gives us exciting opportunities going forward. And if you look at the recommendations to the Cabinet, is to approve in principle the freehold purchase by the council of the property Maritime House, 65 New Road, Basingstoke, and it gives the postcode, subject to full survey and due diligence, to delegate authority to finalise the detailed terms and conditions and any supporting documentation with the freehold purchase to the Director of Regeneration in consultation with the Chief Executive Finance Officer, Section 151 Officer, and the Head of Law and Governance and Monitoring Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Gavin.
Yes, thank you. Endorse what Laura's said on this. There's no doubt at all that our outreach service is absolutely critical. The worst thing is entrenched rough sleeping, people long term on the streets, because it becomes harder and harder to engage them with services. And the outreach team do amazing work in identifying new faces early, getting them in for an assessment, understanding their needs and how they got into the situation they're in, and then supporting them into long term suitable accommodation. It's not an easy task in the current climate, but they do an amazing job. Sticking to this from a financial point of view, obviously the challenge is the owner of the property looking to sell it does put that service at risk. Putting it anywhere else within in property we own, there isn't anything we own where it would be suited to go to. And actually, if otherwise they're renting, and if they rent a property, obviously because we commission them, we'd have to pay that rent. So this is actually a cheaper option, is to buy the property. We've got the money to do it thanks to the amazing work of our housing team and as Laura said, the innovation. So this is £300,000 that is specifically for the purposes of supporting and preventing homelessness. We get this money because of the amazing work they do, and it's really credit to the officers that they keep doing good stuff with this money, which means we keep getting sent more of it, which means we can do even better stuff, and that's fantastic. So absolutely endorse the view that this is a great way of making sure the service has a continued home, service. Obviously, we recommissioned it at some point, but the service can continue and have that sense of security in the short and medium term, And I think the reassuring thing for us is, although this isn't one of those times where I talk about a great revenue return, because this is about delivering a service, the value of the property market at the moment means that we've got an asset that we're not going to lose value. So in the future, it could be used for something else and become surplus to what we need. So it's a safe way of storing our money, if you like, particularly as we can't really use this money for any other purpose.
Thank you, Gavin. Andy. Evening, Andy. How you doing?
Evening, Leader, Cabinet. There's just a few things that I'm picking up in passing after your preambles. You mentioned reducing carbon emissions of waste. I actually saw an electric bin truck on my round the other week. You didn't mention that. I don't know if that was accidental or by omission. You also mentioned street cleaning and weed spraying. I hope you've got some outreach program going with Hampshire County Council, because the weeds on the highways are absolutely disgusting, the worst I've ever seen them, and weeds and grass are causing visibility hazards in a number of locations of Basingstoke, not least Winklebury and Brighton Hill. Also, the strategic importance of the leisure park. I would like to think you'll have an announcement on the ice rink. I think it's high time we gave the ice users what they need, which is a temporary ice rink and
I'm
path
going
to
to very
permanent
gently
replacement.
ask you to stick to the item if you don't mind. Thank you.
And not least the strategic importance is certainly important for car meets. There was one on Sunday night. A commitment to end rough sleeping. We've heard that before. I'm a bit confused because I thought the previous administration claimed they'd done that. Apparently not. Is that really a realistic commitment that you appear to be putting some resources in place? When I look at your proposals on page 49 for Maritime House, I do have to say, what actually is happening with the homeless outreach, and are you looking to expand the service or increase funding after Hampshire County Council announced its withdrawal of all their funding for homeless support services from March 2025? What services are they doing? What services are you looking to pick up on that? That's my first question. My second question is what are your plans for Makerspace? Because the introduction by Councillor James, page 50 of the papers, mentions it would allow Makerspace to continue to thrive in the borough until alternative premises can be found. So are you actually seeking to eventually chuck out Makerspace from those premises? And looking further through the papers, section 3.1 is ominously titled Further Development Opportunities, section 3.2 Housing Development, section 3.3 Regeneration. What are you thinking of doing in terms of new road and regeneration? It's been talked about for about 20 years, but not a huge amount has happened apart from we've had the flats on the south side of New Road, and that's about it really. And 3.4 future disposal, which then is contained in the confidential appendix, and it appears that it's quite difficult for normal councillors to get confidential papers on Modern Gov. Mine doesn't work, so we have to ask for paper copies, which aren't always available. I'm not sure what to make about having to pay Hampshire County Council as a previous landowner. I mean, that sounds like something from a football transfer. They've done naff all on this, and why should we give them any money? And that's it from my point of view. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Andy. Aaron, you're next.
Thank you, colleagues. I'm not here to oppose this proposal, and I strongly endorse this proposal to purchase this property. However, the Julian Homes charity, which I work there, and the Makerspace are very valuable community and social enterprises. And I have few questions regarding this, on the details of this purchase. While I don't have exact information about the amount we would like to buy this one from, but in the risk category of these pages have mentioned, there is a risk of the value of this property may be decreasing. How big is the risk? I just want to understand it. And again, in terms of income from the tenants.
Aaron, just before you go any further,
Yeah.
just be careful that you don't stray onto pink papers, okay?
Okay.
If you want to stray onto pink papers, you need to tell me now, and we will go into closed session. So just be careful with what you choose to. By all means, carry on, but just be careful you don't stray onto the pink papers. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Nothing mentioned from the pink papers. Okay. In fact, I haven't looked into the pink papers. Okay. So I would like to understand what property of the risk is, how much is the risk. And my main concern is the potential shift towards housing development, which is mentioned predominantly in the papers. Between the lines, what I understood is if this happens, this housing development happens, are we going to be limited to the 6 apartments that is mentioned in the white papers? Nothing is mentioned in the pink papers. The 6 apartments is mentioned in the white paper. Or could it evolve into something similar to a year and a half back, a proposed development by Two Saints at the 180 Culver Road? So that is one of the main concerns expressed by my residents. Because it is our own property, as a council, we can make the decision. So finally, given this property falls within the Brookwell and Kingsford ward, which has the highest population density in the borough, which has 5,500 house, could the cabinet consider using this as an opportunity to develop additional community facility? Because Brookwell Village Hall is the only community facility in Brookwell and Kingsford ward, a proper community facility owned by the community, owned by the council. So I would like to throw these ideas to the cabinet before making the decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron. Okay, colleagues, Gavin, and I'll come back to Laura.
Yeah, firstly, dealing with the rough sleeping, and Laura will have more detailed on numbers. Rough sleeping is not a short-term project, it's an ongoing mission. And so the last administration did have some success in the area. There's no doubt about that. They count the numbers. It's never accurate, but the best we can do. And they did have success, but that success isn't, oh, we've done it, we'll move on. It's an ongoing thing. Tomorrow there'll be a new face appearing on the streets. It's every prospect of it, and the outreach team will deal with that and make sure that person doesn't get trenched on the street. So it's not something we can now take for granted. It's an ongoing issue. So Julian House, the work they're doing is simply something that will have to go on forever. But it has been going on. It's been very successful so far. So we're not talking about new resources. We're maintaining that resource. We will look to, in the event that Hampshire County Council, nothing's been confirmed, do withdraw funding. Obviously, that's something in our budget making exercise we will have to look at to see how we make sure we might adapt or change the service slightly, but how we can make sure we continue to do the good work that it's doing. It'll be an absolute cabinet priority for us. It's one of those pressures that we know may sit within budget making. In terms of the long term, it does mention the options in terms of the long term. At the moment, our priority is to make sure Julian House can continue to function in a stable property, and this is the option of doing it, and that's why we're making this decision. We're not making a decision about the long term, but recognising actually owning that site, having control over that site means we can be open to ideas in the future. But the priority is, because the funding being used, it is being funded for supporting homelessness services. In the same way with Makerspace, that's not a statutory responsibility of this council. We love the work they do. It works well being sort of sharing the property at the moment, and if that continues to work well, it's not something we're looking to change imminently. It's just recognising that the main purpose, or the sole purpose of buying this property, is to support the delivery of homelessness services.
Well said, Gavin. Laura.
Thank you. I think Councillor Gavin James has made the point about rough sleeping. You don't sort of just cure rough sleeping one day and that's it, it's done. Somebody could be out there tonight and then we would house them, and then another 2 people turn up. So it's ongoing, and I can't stress the excellent work that our partners are doing in housing. And there's a whole range of services that are going on to support this whole initiative. It's not one initiative, it's many. And, maybe what we could do, Andy, is to brief you on some of those things that we're doing, or what our partners are doing. So, it's just continuous. In relation to the cuts from county, I mean, that has been put on hold. The leader has a meeting with the council leader, and that has been put on hold at the moment. But in relation behind the scenes, the Social Inclusion Partnership is doing an enormous amount of work and made representation to county in relation to those cuts. So if we need to action and be able to the impact of those cuts, we are prepared as a partnership and we will respond to that challenge, but we're not there yet. In relation to Make a Space, they are amazing, aren't they? They're an amazing organisation. And of course, we are, and I think Councillor James made a commitment to that organisation and that enterprise within the borough. And I'm sure, John, you will, and I don't know if you've visited them yet or not, but we'll be supporting them. I know that other people have supported and visited them in what they're doing there. But yeah, I mean, we are committed to them and the work that they're doing. This is about securing the site in relation to the long term. We're not there. This is about the potential that we have for the site. And this isn't about a community facility, Aaron. This was purchased for with homelessness monies, and we need to be mindful of that. And this is about what we do with the site in relation to that. But I'm more than happy to meet with either yourself, Aaron, or Andy, if you want to talk about what we're doing in relation to homelessness, and maybe we could brief you on that so you understand that. But just to say, in relation to Make a Space, I fully understand what they do there, and it's it's doing a great piece of work, a really important area for the borough, and we value organisations like that. And in relation to the services that are run from that site at the moment in relation to homelessness, we need to secure those.
Thank you, Laura. Colleagues, would anybody else like to? Okay, I've got a couple of comments to make just in response to what's been said. I think any decision we make where the authority purchases a property, as Gary rightly says, we go through processes and we go through due diligence and we go through a regime whereby we identify the risk, we understand the implications, and we understand the options associated with the site. That's one element. The second element, which is separate but nonetheless absolutely critical in this regard, is the services that are being provided from this particular site. And we are committed to the services that are being provided from this site. So in making the decision from the property perspective, we're securing those services for the future. And they're not, as Laura says, the only services. If I think about the decisions that this cabinet have made, the administration have made together, things that we all have seen as being a priority when we've discussed homelessness, for example, the investment into May Place, for example, the investment into the housing agenda that we're putting out, all of those services and the great work the SIP is doing, all of that is supported by this administration, and I would say by the 54 councillors. I think we all support that, and that's why we've made it a priority. County have got some very significant issues to deal with financially. We know that. And were they to consider cutting this area, and we hope they do not, and we will be lobbying them not to, but we then have to take some very important decisions. But county services are county services, and that's very important to distinguish. Our work on the SIP, actually, for county and working with them, and it's all our other partners as well, has been hugely successful over many years, and it's carrying on being so. So I think that's the priority. I just want to be absolutely clear. The priority here is the homelessness services that are being delivered from this particular site. And that's the point of making this decision, is to secure them and the makerspace that goes with it. So whatever happens in the future is in the future. Right here, right now, this decision is about that. And that's why the resources are coming from the particular budget related to homelessness to enable us to do that. We could not be clearer that that is the point of this decision. And so, colleagues, in making the decision, Laura's already identified the recommendation that her and Gavin are suggesting to us on this paper. Are you happy to take the recommendation as written on page 51 of the report that we approve in principle, because we are going through that analysis of due diligence, the officers are undertaking that, in principle, the freehold purchase by the council of the property, and we delegate the authority as set out in bullet point number 2 there to our lead officers to assist us. Are you happy in making that decision, and do you agree? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. I'm going to move on and take item 9 next, because Andy is speaking on this one. And I'm going to ask Gavin to introduce, followed by Laura. Gavin, would you like to introduce, please, the Winkleberry paper?
Yes, this is the Winkleberry regeneration. That's been a topic of the council for a number of years, working in partnership with Vivid Housing to increase the delivery of more properties and also remove some of the eyesores perhaps in Winkleberry and the worst parts of Winkleberry in terms of the Winkleberry Centre and obviously the derelict play centre, etc. This paper isn't about an overall value on the quality of the regeneration, although I think the regeneration actually is a huge move forward. But I recognise within the community of Winkleberry, the community will always want more, because that's quite right, and councillors always fight for more. But that decision's already gone through the planning committee of development control. So this is really dealing with our contribution to that, which is, although there are a number of parcels of land, some don't really qualify as parcels, they're more like envelopes. There's 2 significant parcels of land that the council own that would be looking to release into the scheme. One area is the area at the end of Carisbrooke Close, which is currently a sort of open space with a play area in it. The idea is to obviously move the play area, or a new play area, into the former Fort Hill site, which will be sitting in a much bigger play area, so that can be developed into 100% affordable housing. And the other area is the former play centre, which is along Winkleberry Way. It's been derelict for a number of years, and that will be a new medical centre with some flatted developments affordable on top of that. So those are the 2 significant parcels of land we are looking to release. Now, obviously, as part of our council due diligence, we have to look at whether we're getting best value for anything we dispose of. I'd like to say this is a legal term of best value. I think taking land that isn't widely used, or in one case it's widely used, but we're going to replace it with even better recreational space, and a piece of land we're not using, and turn it into affordable housing and a medical centre, you couldn't get much better value than that. But obviously in legal terms, so this definition in the recommendation about best value, that's a legal term, not our term. We are agreeing to dispose of it at effectively nil value, which is lower than the valuation would be. However, the social benefits of doing it and the fact it unlocks a wider scheme and investment does make it effectively great value for the people of Basingstoke. So the decision we're looking to make as a cabinet is to agree that the council-owned land within the regeneration area, which is mapped out, is that we hand that over to Vivid Housing as part of the regeneration project. That's subject to agreement heads and terms, a satisfactory section 123 valuation report, undertaking a subsidy control assessment. So the last bits of legal due diligence, that's all delegated to the Director of Regional Services in consultation with Head of Law and Governments to make sure that we've met all our legal obligations in relation to that prior to signing it off. But the Cabinet decision is for tonight to make sure that we can move on with this project. And I think I will say is, without this, the project isn't viable, it doesn't happen. And it's not a case of, could we get a better scheme at this stage? This is the scheme. It's gone through planning. It's either the scheme that's been approved with this land added to it, or included as part of it, or we say no, and then the regeneration does not happen. The project goes, and so does the money, and Winkleberry stays as it is. I think not only would that be bad for Winkleberry, but I do worry that that sends a message this town, this borough, is not committed to regeneration, and that will have implications for the work that Sovereign are looking at doing in Southam and other areas. So it's really important that we get on with this, because this is one of the final pieces of the jigsaw to get Winkleberry regenerated and improved for the existing residents and new residents living in affordable properties.
Thank you, Kevin. Laura, would you like to add anything from a housing perspective?
Sorry. Yeah, I would also just like to talk about the loss of public open space and the play equipment upon it is in relation to planning policy, is that we don't do that in this borough, and it's very clear with that, and it talks about that within the local plan. But it's something very different when you're talking about regeneration, and my experience of regeneration across the borough, whether it was rural regeneration or whether we're talking about Popley or Oakridge, is that we were required to give up land to be able to regenerate. But when we're still talking about the loss of open space, as is Carisbrook site, that site is 1.92 acres, is being replaced by 11 acres of playing field land on the former Fort Hill site. So it's just moving that land to a different place. And the experience we have within Oakridge, we were required to do that to achieve the regeneration that we needed, and we were required as part of several sites to do that. In fact, we lost on one of the sites the quantum of open space. There wasn't as much, but we did achieve regeneration. But when you look at the Carisbrook site and what is going to be developed on that site, we're going to have 11 houses. 4 of them are going to be 4 large 4-bedroom houses, and they will be 7 bed spaces. Currently, the waiting time for 4-bed houses on the register is 6 years plus. There is a need for this locally as well in Winklebury. 134 additional units will be part of this regeneration, replacing the 69 units at Winklebury Centre, which is in desperate need of regeneration. Only 7 new affordable housing units have been delivered in Winklebury in well over 15 years. Only 2% of all affordable vacancies for rent became available within Winklebury last year, and only 2% over the last 5 years. That was 90 units. So, this is a really good story in relation to regeneration, in relation to those people in housing need on our register, in those people that need those larger units. They haven't been delivered. This is the opportunity to do it. But it's also, if you were to walk the area of Winklebury and look at it, it really is crying out for regeneration. The Winklebury Centre is in desperate need. And I think this is going to be really positive. It's change. It's not going. The open space isn't going to be in the same place, but that is often the case when it comes to regeneration, and it's not easy for communities to recognise and understand that change. But the story is that we're going to have an 11-acre site which is going to be open to the community to play on with play equipment. And that's a real positive. Thank you.
Andy, if you want to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader Cabinet. So I infer from this, on the face of it, it's good news. Section 1.2 of the paper mentions transfer of freehold of title at nil value. So that's basically going to mean that Vivid are not going to be paying for the land. They're going to get the land and they're going to go ahead. I presume that means the Section 106 is now be agreed and everything is in place. Councillor Laura James, you mentioned loss of public open space, Carisbrook Close. That's a very contentious issue with Winklebury residents that we're losing that. A lot of people have grudgingly accepted that. Some people are still upset about that. Councillor Gavin James, you mentioned it's a huge move forward, and I just get stuck in the core of the way you said the community always wants more, being dismissive about it. Winkley residents were extremely upset at these proposals. They are inadequate proposals. They went through DC, and now everything that they feared seems to be being realised in terms of going ahead with an inadequate proposal that doesn't meet most of their needs and just going full scheme ahead. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to regenerate Winkley. You mentioned removing an eyesore, but the main eyesore in the current thing is the Three Barrels pub, and I'd like to ask if there is any progress on the Three Barrels pub, because Vivid had said, oh, we could have a part 2 application to address the issue of the Three Barrels pub. We had a young lad who nearly died on exposed mains wiring on that pub. It's been derelict for years, and there seems to be no sign that any progress is being made to regenerating that. And finally, you mentioned Vivid and Sovereign. Well, Sovereign's different housing association. Vivid seemed to be very slow at progressing this regeneration. Various people have kicked around Winkelbury regeneration for well over 20 years. We used to be better at regeneration. Part of that is because we had a better government, but it's been a long time since we managed to successfully regenerate. And the last thing that went through the Fremantle Close area of Oakridge was over 10 years ago. Prior to that, Farrow and Waldive in Popley, that was when I was still a councillor my first term in 2010, 11, 12 when that went through. Longfellow Parade, that was nearly 20 years ago, and Oakridge Village, that was just over 20 years ago. So we were a lot better back then than we are now. And I appreciate some of that is down to the previous central government. But I think as an administration, as a council, we shouldn't be too pleased with what we're doing with Winkelbury Regen so far. We need to step up. We need to make this happen. We need to deliver a better scheme that's got better health provision. We need to do something about that derelict pub, because it is a complete eyesore, and it's completely unacceptable to the residents of Winkelbury that that is being left untouched while the rest of the scheme progresses. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Gavin, and then Laura.
Yeah, firstly, I certainly didn't intend any disrespect. In fact, the complete opposite. If this was happening in my community that I represent, we'd want more, because that's what you do. As a ward councillor, you always want more. There is a reality, and that's viability and possibility, or two realities. So the viability of the scheme has to work. And I think this is why this land, the value we're choosing to gain from this land, which is, as you mentioned, zero, is to make sure that viability stacks up and we get the outcomes we want, or the best outcomes we can possibly achieve. Adding more to the scheme needs to add more money to the scheme, and there isn't the more money to be added to the scheme unless you sort of start sacrificing affordable houses for private houses, and that's when we don't get the outcomes we want. So it's a balance of those things to get the right outcomes, which I think we've achieved in this scheme. But of course, we'd love to have 100% social housing out of this scheme, and we'd love to have a lot more stuff. In terms of Three Barrels pub, again, it's that's more about the possibility than the viability. If the owner doesn't want to sell something, there's not much you can do about it. Or if they're holding out for an unrealistic value for something, there's nothing you can do about that. Apart from, well, that's a very long and winded process, which I'm not necessarily saying isn't going to be part of something in the future. But right now, this scheme, we do need to get up and running. We can't wait forever. And we'll keep a watch on that and see what can be done. I totally accept the Three Barrels is an eyesore, and we'd like something to move with it, but we are very much in the hands of the person who owns it in terms of doing something with it. So, well, I think that's something. Well, that's something we can look into, but I think it was looked into, and that adds more expense. Yeah, no, it's expensive, and then you don't get the viability. It's not a conversation we're having. We can have a conversation outside.
Thank you, Andy.
But viability-wise, you're just adding more cost and more time, and that wipes out the scheme, and then you have to start sacrificing. It costs. I'm not going to go through it again. I think we've explained it 3 times. If you're struggling with your hearing, we can get you a loop. There is a process with CPOs. That means it takes time and it costs money. The cost of that money gets added to the overall scheme, making it unviable. Have we got it now? Please, if you haven't got it, go away and find a grown-up to explain it to you.
Come on.
No,
we're not. Andy, we're not having a 2-to-2 across the table. All right, you got into a conversation. It should have been left there. Let's move on. All right, you've asked important questions. Let's address them. Laura, thank you, Gavin.
Thank you. In relation to regeneration, I think it's. I think this regeneration is important. It's important to point out that it's not we inherited this regeneration. This isn't our regeneration. This is something that happened under the previous administration. So I think that's important to say that. I think that what's also important to say is that, and I'd like to thank the leader for this, is working with Vivid to ensure that they meet with and work with the councillors within Winklebury, and I think, I'm not sure, but I think they meet with them now on is it a monthly or bi-monthly, to update and work with on a regular basis. And so there is a commitment, and I know, Andy, you turned up to that last meeting, so, and I think that's the place for you to have that discussion about the pub with them. It's not unusual to offer up land for regeneration. It's happened in all of those sites that you talked about previously. In Oak Ridge Village, there was land that we gave in relation to peppercorn, and also there wasn't 106 because that doesn't happen in relation to regeneration neither. It's a very different beast, and also then that was a different beast because there was lots and lots of money available historically. Just recently there hasn't been. Whether there will be under this new government, I don't know. But I think, we need to move on. It's we can't allow areas like the Winklebury Centre to continue to be as is. We have a planning application before us, and it's what do we do in relation to these parcels. And I think I support that we actually this paper, and I know that the community, there are and there will be concerns about the loss of some of that open space, but then they're losing it, but they're gaining it elsewhere, and it will be in a different place, and it's going to be really special, that open space, and the facilities on that open space are going to be second to none, and it's going to be a great place to live for many people. Thank you.
I'd like to bring in Annalie, because Annalie's been working on the regeneration perspective with Vivid, and you have a contribution to make here.
Thank you very much, Leader. I just want to say that we as an administration are passionately committed to the residents of Winklebury and the wider community. We, as an administration, have worked tirelessly with all of the partners from the very beginning of our administration, and with officers, to get as much as we could for the residents of Winklebury. And I and fellow members of the Cabinet have spent a huge amount of time with the political representatives of Winklebury and with Vivid, and with the partners. We've met with the Primary Care Trust. We have walked the site. We've been locked in the site accidentally, when we've had officers climbing over 6-foot fences. We are determined to make this regeneration the best that we can deliver for the residents of Winklebury, who are unbelievably important to us as residents. And we will continue to strive and to ensure that everything that is delivered from the offer is the best. And we are determined to make sure that it's best.
Colleagues, would anybody else like to make a contribution? Chris?
Thank you, Chair. So I've just got one question. It's maybe a couple of parts. It's about guarantees. So we're seeing about selling this for them to deliver 100% affordable housing, and to what we are being shown is the planning layout that was approved. So can I be assured that if they don't, they cannot, through the terms of the agreement, not deliver 100% and not change the layout? Or if they do, there is some caveat that we have some control over it and possibly comes back to us if necessary.
The reality is, Chris, those are planning matters, and those planning matters will be subject to our officer team obviously observing and enforcing the planning application that was approved. It's now an approved planning application, so they will do exactly what you're saying, because that is the nature of the approval. So yes, you can have that from that. This is us as the cabinet dealing with it as a landowning responsibility, not as a planning authority, which is a separate matter from us entirely, and we shouldn't fetter our position in any way because we don't. But the question you ask is relevant because the planning team will then deliver what you say.
Yes, that's half of it. The fact is, if there's a second planning application that goes in that would see this not be what we expect it to have been, and we've given the land, have we got some comeback?
We do, because that's why the heads of terms and the contract negotiations go on, because there's conditions attached to why we are releasing the land. So it's more watertight than a normal planning application. It could be varied. Yes.
Sorry, finally, that means it's watertight in the heads of terms. Right, thank you.
Which is a really important point, because just taking a step back for a moment, and I know, and I get that Andy's come along, and I know you're passionate about it, Andy. I don't want to undercut the passion that you're showing because of how much it matters to you. We do too. And I recognise the fact that you've been supporting your ward colleagues in this throughout, and I respect that as well. It's not just the fact that you live there, but you're supporting your colleagues as a councillor. So I want to say we respect that. We respect them as ward councillors too, which is why in inheriting this, you're right. This is the first regeneration that I can think of this scale since New Horizons was done in Oakridge. And that was a project led by ward councillors. It was us as the ward councillors that facilitated, a bit like others in other wards, with effectively being involved in it. And so shaping this has been really difficult, because you pick something up and you try to get it to the place where you think it should be from a place where it has started. And one of the things that we do know is that the medical centre is absolutely critical, and that the issues of the ICB are significant. And we know that because it's impacting across the entire borough. It's not just Winkleberry. The fact that residents of Winkleberry have to travel into the town centre to get a bus, to then travel out of the town centre to Popley to access a surgery, is a major problem. And I know, because I've knocked on the doors of people when Fort Hill was being done away with, and actually the answer to the question is Fort Hill should never have been done away with, but it has, so we're now living with that. That's the answer to the question. Fort Hill should never have been lost in the first place. It was a county decision, and the former Conservative administration here supported that, and it was a disgrace. But it's done. And the issue now is that the people of Winkleberry deserve a surgery provided by the ICB, but their revenue funding of that is going to be incredibly difficult given their financial position. So we need to look to the new government to say, how are you going to structure primary care now, particularly when you're putting a stop on the hospital and you're reviewing in the spending review primary care. It's a massive question. It's not the only one they've got to deal with. That's one of the key questions. How do you deal with an ICB with the level of debt that it's got because of the way that the health service has been managed? But our perspective, what Vivid can do, is build a surgery to the scale that residents were looking for at 550 square metres, more than the 225. And that was a key part of the negotiation, and we want them to deliver that. But in order to fit it out, in terms of services, we are reliant on an ICB at the moment that is not in a great place. And we want to support them too, because we want their services across the whole of the borough to be good and better, because our residents deserve that. And you knock on a door that doesn't talk to you about how bad GP services are in the town at the moment. It is difficult to get an appointment. It is difficult to hold on to that appointment. I was doing casework this week in regard to that. So we understand how much Winkleberry, like every other community, suffers on that point. I think regeneration is not easy. It's one of the most difficult things to do in the world, because how do you take an existing community and take it with you on a journey of change? Because regeneration is about change. We are taking a community in the flatted development of the Winkleberry Centre that has been desperate for regeneration for donkey's years. Absolutely years. They're desperate for that. But this proposal does deliver that. It may not be what everybody wants, but it is a regeneration that will deliver affordable homes in Winkleberry, socially rented homes that otherwise would not be on the table. And I want to see the government invest through Homes England in more socially rented housing and in more regeneration, because that's how we're going to unlock a lot of the other areas of our town that need regeneration too. Because it's not just this one single project, is it? There's so much more that we want to achieve for regeneration across the borough. So we are going to need to look to government to help us here. We've got the aspiration. Has government got the ability to give us the money? We are constantly working with the community, and that is really, really important. I'm conscious that you attended the last meeting with Vivid. We know that you cannot CPO anything until you have a genuine regeneration project on the go in the first place. We have to take these steps to get that far. And even then, it isn't guaranteed of success because of the very complicated nature of CPO powers. It isn't just a magic wand that we can flash and make it happen. It will take a tremendous amount of work and money to achieve that. What could be made a lot easier is if the owner of the Three Barrels wanted to work with Vivid of his own volition to achieve a result for the residents of Winkleberry. And all we can do is implore him to do that as the right and moral thing that he should do for the residents of Winkleberry. But we are watching, and we are very aware of how important that particular site is to the rest of potentially what a future phase could be. But we need to take this decision with the application, with the delivery of the scheme before we can get to that stage. And that's the way the law is. We have to follow that with due diligence, with due appropriate diligence to taxpayers' money to get it right. So the council's enabling role becomes part of this, really important, and we want to hold Vivid's feet to the fire to deliver the very best regeneration we can get them to deliver, which means the choice of contractor will be incredibly important in all of this. So there's so much to this, but this just simple decision is about the use of council land to enable regeneration. And that's the decision we're actually making here this evening. All the other elements to it, and there are mosaic element, it is a patchwork quilt of holding this all together, will come as a package, Andy, and we're working through that with you. And your colleagues are going to get a monthly update from Vivid. We're going to have regular meetings in terms of informing them and briefing them. We want Vivid to do that with us. We want them to work with us in that regard. So there's good, solid transparency and communication. And Anneli and I were at that meeting with you, and they committed to that. So thank you to Vivid for doing that with us. I've got two colleagues to come in. I'm bringing John and then bringing on Anneli. But John, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I just want to highlight the fact that West Streeting's on record as saying that the primary care aspect of the NHS needs a greater share of the overall NHS budget. So I would urge anyone who's got influence with the government and the Labour Party to hold them to account on that statement. Thank you.
That's really important. Go on, Anneli.
And I also think it's really important to highlight that we want a really productive relationship with Vivid, because Vivid has potentially loads of other opportunities to work with us as a council if they deliver what our communities want going forward. So it's not a one-off, a one-hit wonder for them. They need to understand that we've got such incredible aspirations for the whole of this borough, for the social rented sector. So I believe we have leverage. And I think that the second point I wanted to say is that if I were the owner of a private site there now, I might be wanting to do the deal now on the basis of some of the languages coming out of the current government and the financial remunerations that he might not get in the near future as a result of what the Labour Party might be doing.
And that's a matter for him, it's not a matter for us, absolutely. So look, we've got the decision in front of us. I just want to emphasise that, you know, there are other communities that we need to be. It's not just Winkleberry, there's Buckskin, there's South Ham, there's a whole range of communities across the borough, you know, that need regeneration. Brighton Hill, we can pick out communities where we do want to see regeneration in the future. But this is specifically about this site in Winkleberry. And so colleagues, if you go to the recommendation that's in front of us on page 76, it's set out there in the 3 paragraphs, and bearing in mind the entire debate that we've had this evening, are you happy to make that recommendation and take us forward on what is a continuing journey on this? Agreed. Thank you. And thank you, Andy, for your contribution. Back to the main agenda, I've got item 7, which is proposed fare increase on Route 55 bus service. Andy.
hopefully a less controversial topic. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the 55 bus, it's a service that provides a link for Old Basing residents with shopping destinations in and around the town. The service is operated by an organisation called Basingstoke Community Transport on behalf of us as the Borough Council. There have been a number of factors, particularly changes to government funding and also the increased running costs that we've all encountered as well in our day-to-day lives, which means that the viability of the service is now under serious threat. If we don't do something about it, if we don't take action, there's a real risk that this service may stop in the future. To prevent that happening, and I think, well, I certainly believe that we ought to be looking after the service, preserving it for the future. We're proposing that the charge for a single journey on the 55 bus is increased from £1 to £2. This is because the level of government funding that Basingstoke Community Transport receives is directly linked to the fare that it charges. So if we double the fare, we'll be able to restore the organisation's income to something very close to its previous level prior to the funding cuts. Now, there's obviously potentially some concern there around what happens if we double the fare. Well, it's important to stress that this fare will have no material impact. This fare increase will have no material impact on the vast majority of users. We undertook some analysis of ticket sales data prior to undertaking this work, and we found that almost every passenger on the 55 bus is the holder of a concessionary fare pass, so they don't have to pay to travel. In fact, only 3 passengers paid for a journey on the number 55 bus over the past 2 years, so it's less than 1% of total bus users. The ward councillors for the affected area are supportive of these proposals. There's one sat around this table who has happily raised her hand to show her continued support. We also undertook a public consultation on the proposed fare increase back in the summer, and we had absolutely 0 responses back. So this is clearly not an issue that is concerning the residents of Old Basing. So with all of that in mind, I'd encourage the Cabinet to support these proposals so that they come into effect from the 1st of October and we increase the fare from £1 to £2. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Anybody else want to make a contribution? The recommendation is on page 43 at the bottom to approve the fare increase. If I have no more, would you like to approve? Do you agree with the recommendation? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 10, page 113 is the Q1 Capital Monitoring Report at the 30th of June. Gavin.
Yep, as always, Q1 is not the most exciting monitoring report for anything. Capital, essentially, it shows that there is a £400,000 underspend so far in the first 3 months of this year. Relates to 2 schemes. One is the Northern Community Scheme, which has essentially been about agreeing final proposals and plans and architects, and that's now, I understand, underway, so that'll appear in Q2 instead, so a very small slippage there. And the other one is around Leisure Park and sort of public realm work, £164,000 around a master plan, and that's effectively on hold whilst we get the Aquadrome replacement further down the line before spending any money. So it's a good news story. There is something for us beyond noting that, and that is, as we mentioned earlier, Maritime House joins the capital programme if agreed by full council. So the request is to note the report, but also to agree that we will be asking full council, next full council meeting, to add £300,000 to the capital programme to support the purchase of Maritime House.
Thank you, Gavin. Anybody else? The recommendation for us is set out on 114, as Gavin has said. If there are no more, are you happy to take the recommendation as said on 114? Agreed. Thank you. The last paper this evening is number 11, the Revenue Monitoring Report on 131. Gavin.
I refer to the comments I made earlier about Q1 monitoring. This is a very similar situation. There is at the moment a small surplus emerged in the budget. This essentially is lots of rent re-gears, etc. have led us to a slightly increased revenue position that we were expecting. Beyond that, it really is tiny amounts of money in terms of what's changed within the budget. This will be something full council notes. The exciting news, and it's a shame he's left, but I'm sure we'll raise it at full council, is one of the overspends was around repairing our parks, particularly in Sinclair Drive, where sorting out the drainage issue has cost us slightly more than we were expecting. So that's an overspend that I'm sure there'll be great joy and delight in the Brook Vale, but at least it shows that scheme is progressing.
That's good to hear. Okay, colleagues, anybody got any contributions? The recommendation is set out on page 132 at the top. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
There are no other items on the agenda this evening, so I close the meeting and thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you, everybody.